All right.
Hey, how are you,
So
Dantel?
we got
I'm good,
somebody
everybody.
today on the show. Somebody we're supporting. Fam, when this gentleman left a tweet, he left two tweets. I sent him $5 for each tweet. I love reading his stuff. It was great having Black on the Empire on Friday, and today we have Unapologetic here with us today. How you doing, Dantel?
I'm good. Thanks for having me, guys. I've been watching the show for a very long time since you guys had like 1,000 subscribers. So
Wow.
I'm glad to finally be on the show.
Thank you. Thank you for being a viewer and thank you for coming on today. We really love your tweets. We love what you have to say. And we can discuss Biden, but we also wanted to discuss with you this article you wrote on Substack recently, right? Because you talked about the takeover of the Democratic Party and how that was a failure. And, we just wanted to get your viewpoint on those issues. Pasta, if you want to...
Well, yeah. I just got to tell everybody, go over to this Twitter account, subscribe, and read this article. This is a quick read, but it is so great. You really confirmed my opinions about why I felt I wasn't supporting Nina Turner and why I stopped supporting anybody running for the Democratic Party. And you did it in such a great way. You looked at the psychology of the whole situation. And I want to talk a little bit about that because in your article, you talked about the hostile takeover of the Democratic Party that we all thought we were going to do 6 years ago, right? Or 5 years ago. We're going to get in there. We're going to change this party. You know what I'm saying? But whatever happened, and everybody seemed to fall at the waistline. Instead of people going and pushing back against the Democratic Party, they capitulated to it, right? They became shit libs. So why on earth, even with all the receipts we produce, do the progressive voters still think they can change this party from the inside, Dantel?
I don't know. It's bizarre to me because it feels like no matter what happens, no matter how many times their theory of politics is disproven, it's just like water off a duck's back, and they just refuse to like internalize new information. And like we've seen so many times, it's been proven so many times since this movement started, and this focus on the electoral strategy started back in 2015. And like I mentioned in another article I wrote on Substack, it's we've raised this movement, this grassroots movement funded by working class people in this country, raised over $270 million. And that's a low estimate because there were several races that I left off. I only came to that total with the most prominent ones who won their races and are in Congress, and a combination of that and Bernie Sanders, both of his primary campaigns. And so we raised over $270 million, and basically all that money is just up in smoke because there's nothing to show for it. And the way that I come at all of this is, it's not like, we're not like the other side where there's like endless corporate money, billions of dollars in lobbyists backing us or whatever. We're funded by regular working class people, poor people in this country, and we have limited resources. And so for me, it's come down to like a fundamental question, like, so why are we going to keep funneling all of our resources, our volunteer hours and all of our efforts and energy into this failed strategy? And we know it produces no results, but we're still going to do it anyway, and to the detriment of the only real option that we have left, which is public pressure and direct action, and that combined with mutual aid to keep people afloat in the meantime. So for me, that's the way I approach this whole thing. And a lot of people, they it's like they're frozen in time from back when like this idea was first, floated, and we all got on board with it because it sounded like a great idea. But ever since then, we've had instances like the CARES Act and the whole year of inaction during the pandemic and economic crisis, the force to vote, the failure to act on the eviction crisis, the silence on Joe Biden and his war crimes in Syria, offensively attacking the Syrian government and the forces on the ground who fought back against ISIS. So like at every turn, they show that they're not going to fight even a little bit. And it really came to head, of course, with force to vote. But even recently, the marches for Medicare for All that just happened, even that in the middle of a pandemic, the number one issue that they ran on They won't even come out and support activists in the street who are agitating for it in the middle of a pandemic, and they're the only people in the country doing so. So, like, I can't answer that question. That was a long answer, but I can't answer that question. Why people refuse to accept all this information that we've been given over the last couple of years.
I think that, I don't know if you ever seen the Temple of Doom, with Indiana Jones, but they drank the blood of Kali and they were under this hypnotic spell. I think some of the Democratic establishment got these shitlibs to drink the blood of Kali, and now no matter what they do, they'll never be held accountable, and these people will still follow them endlessly into the dark demons of hell, because we just show them receipts all the time. We're always like, it's not really hard to do this. It's like, oh no, they don't care for you. Look at this money coming from here. Look at this move. Look at this policy position. Look at this vote. And yet they still do it. So I don't know either. I was hoping maybe you had an answer.
And to add on that real quick, like, so that's such a weird way of looking at the situation, because for me, all those instances where we were like really critical of them, those were like career defining moments. Yeah. And they decidedly were on the wrong side. So like all of this everything else is like, it's just theater. Oh, they sent out this nice tweet about Medicare for all. Oh, they slept outside and they had a sleepover for a couple of days, and now we need to throw them a parade. Like, all of those things are inconsequential compared to the missed opportunities.
Oh, yeah.
and all the areas where they were just on the wrong side. So I mean, that is such a weird way of looking at it. If during the biggest upward transfer of wealth, the CARES Act, you didn't push back even a little bit, you didn't try to counter with some type of a socialist program, Medicare for all, UBI, and nationalizing some industries, you didn't even try to counter with that at all. Okay, that's disqualifying. So, like, I don't care what you do after that. And the same with the force to vote, the same with the marches for Medicare for all.
100%. One of the criticisms that people like you get is that, and I include ourselves in that, is that we talk about direct action, right? We talk about how electoral politics isn't really where it's at right now, because they've lost the progressives. There's over 100 people in the progressive caucus. They don't use their leverage. They don't do anything, as we have said. But so you believe that we shouldn't any longer be supportive of an inside game within the Democratic Party, but focus on what you call militant public pressure. Can you give an example of how that is, especially for those who say, well, you're not offering any solutions, you just want to like rant and be mad?
So for me, I think that, like, all of the other avenues, we've tried it. We tried to elect politicians that agree with us. We tried to sign the petitions. We tried to politely call their offices and all those things. We've tried all of that, and it hasn't worked. And we're in the middle of a crisis, the worst emergency in any of our lifetimes. And the government is completely unresponsive. They have literally left the public for dead. So the only option that we have left is to really force the issue and to make it so that business as usual can't continue. And some things that some strategies that I would like to see is maybe, like, I definitely agree with protesting outside of the politicians' offices, outside their homes. Make it so that anytime they go anywhere, they have to face the people in their districts, their constituents, who are demanding that they fight for single payer in the middle of a healthcare crisis. They need to be confronted with their constituents that they've left for dead. It shouldn't just be like some afterthought and like it's just all this theory. Like, they should really see the repercussions of their policies and their inactions. So all the people who are getting evicted, they should be camped outside of politicians' homes and outside their offices. Mm-hmm. They should be in their parking lots, in congressional parking lots, make it so that people can't show up for their appointments because they got nowhere to park and the staff has nowhere to park. Just be creative. Definitely economic strategies like worker strikes. I believe that all the money, if a giant percent or a chunk of the money that we've raised for these progressive campaigns, if that had been diverted to fund strike funds mm-hmm. for workers across the country, people would have been more inclined to take time off of work and protest and really, like I said, prevent business as usual from continuing. If it wasn't just like some financial cliff and the second they stop working, the money stops coming in. So, and I should have, I don't have the exact numbers with me from the article that I wrote a couple months ago where I suggested this. But if, like the UAW, they have a measurement for what they believe is, like, for what their strike pay is and what they think that the workers could survive on. So I did a calculation off of that. And if we had just taken $300 million and used it to fund strike funds, we could have fund strikes for like 3 months and 100,000 workers across the country. So I think we should be more creative in the ways that we want to exert pressure, because what we're doing now isn't working. And sitting around waiting and hoping these politicians, they just, like, it just clicks for them one day, and after a year of not doing anything to advance Medicare for all, they're just finally going to do it. Like, people need to understand that they're not going to do it, and it really is on us to come up with the strategies, implement the strategies, and do what we can to fully support it financially, with volunteering our time, people in new media volunteering their platforms, whatever we can to organize and mobilize people, so that politicians and the establishment have to actually address our concerns.
Yeah. They have to actually do their job, fam. Dontel, I hope if somebody gets serious about that, they talk to you about it, or somebody clips up that point and say, we need to get creative. I think it's a great idea. Show up in the parking lot. They can't friggin' park. They can't get into the parking lot. They're going to miss their meetings. Let them know that they need to do their job.
Yeah.
But you know that whole kind of feeling when people get, fam, we met some people. I don't know if you met people like this, Dontel. Like, I just did my part to help out America. I donated $10 to Alexander Ocasio-Cortez. Instead of donating that $10, you've talked about mutual aid. What would you suggest people put some of their dollars into?
Yeah, I agree that, first of all, the donating, this is why I spend so much time criticizing these charlatans and these sheepdogs for the Democratic Party, because there are many people, billions of people, and we saw it in the Nina Turner race, who will continue to just flood them with money, give them their whatever extra money that they have to these politicians. And ultimately, all that is doing is just funding career ambitions for somebody who's just going to tweet about the policies you like. And it's not advancing your policy agenda. So if two things that you would give the money to these politicians for, if you think that's going to build on this strategy to improve people's lives and actually help people, and you think it's going to advance the policy agenda that we all agree to. And obviously, donating to these politicians isn't doing any of those things. So like you said, mutual aid, if you want to help people, you can help people directly, help people in your community directly who need help. And by donating and volunteering with mutual aid funds, you can help feed your community. If you had $10 and you were donating it to Bernie Sanders at AOC every month, for fucking what? Yeah, donate that to people in your community who need it, because we're the only people who are looking out for each other. Like I said, the government's left us for dead, and they already means tested the assistance that they were giving during COVID, and they're already trying to cut that. They're trying to end they basically ended the eviction moratorium. It was already barely enforced anyway. So it's like they really are just trying to pretend like everything's okay, everything's back to normal. And they just left everybody to the wolves. So if you want to help people, donating to politicians is not going to do it. If you want to help people, you can donate to mutual aid in your community. People, I've seen GoFundMes. I've used it myself online for emergencies, whether it's you're not able to, somebody's not able to cover their rent, or somebody's car broke down, or they have a medical emergency, or they have to pay for a funeral cost, or whatever it is. There are a lot of people in the community who need help, and even $5, $10 that you would give to a politician would make a world of difference in their lives. And you'd actually know that you're helping somebody, instead of like feeding this fantasy that, oh yes, I'm just going to keep feeding the machine and keep feeding the money to the machine, and it's going to spit out a different result. All by the way, while we know, at least in the case of AOC, she's taking that money and giving it to corporate Democrats too. So like all of this, it just makes no sense to keep giving your money to these politicians.
Yeah. Right. Especially with the election issues that we have. So you talked about being fed up with electoral politics, but also that it's good to have an autopsy on campaigns. In Nina's case, you said in your article that she didn't really excite people in her district who don't normally vote, that she didn't offer them anything, that she used words like Medicare for all, but obviously didn't attend any of the marches and hasn't really been fighting for it. She's also was using like Access too, started kind of like using more of the centrist type of strategy. She picked up and hired a lot of the same people that really sunk Bernie Sanders' campaign, even the ones here, which is crazy to me. But do you think she lost this election because she became a status quo centrist Democrat? She was like branding herself to them, or and how much do you think PAC money played into that, and any other issues that you see?
Okay, so that's a really great question. I want to break down all those different parts. So when people say that when I bring up these point and other people bring up this point online, these criticisms about how Nina Turner wasn't acting like the firebrand leftist that she portrayed herself as, and we were bringing up these issues, and it wasn't to say that everybody voting in the Ohio 11th district, they follow politics so closely that they know all the nuance of force of vote and the speaker's race, and they knew that Nina Turner was shaky and she didn't say anything and she didn't apply any pressure to force the vote on Medicare for all, so that's why they didn't vote for it. That's not what I'm saying at all. But when I made those criticisms of Nina Turner and how she wasn't criticizing the Biden administration, she wasn't criticizing Democratic leadership, it encapsulates a phenomenon that we saw, and that the campaign admitted, that strategy that they were admitted, that they were going to try to tone down the criticisms of the Democratic Party and try to like basically fit in with the Democratic Party. So when I was making those criticisms, it wasn't to say that voters follow those specific instances like to the detail, but it was to say that if I notice that there's something going on and she is making that shift, then other people that might see her campaigning might see her as another Democrat, and they won't be inspired to come out.
Yep.
And that kind of is what happened when you have I'm hearing numbers from like the turnout was anywhere from like 15% to 17% or something like that.
Yeah.
And then this is a district with open primaries. So anybody could have came out and vote, and they didn't have to register as a Democrat. So if you mean to tell me you have hundreds of thousands of people who didn't come out to vote, that has nothing to do with how much money her camp was spent on the other side for her opponent. That has nothing to do with that. That means you and your campaign didn't go out and you didn't excite people. And the people who did see you, there wasn't that electricity. There wasn't that magic. They didn't feel like there was something different because you weren't trying to be different. Had Nina Turner, and this is a point I mentioned in the article, had she come out and mentioned the fact that and had everybody in her campaign knocking on her door saying, you know, the reason why you don't have healthcare is because Joe Biden refuses to sign an executive order to provide Medicare to everybody in the country and declare a national disaster. And he has the authority to do it, but he just refuses to do it to protect the profit of his donors in the healthcare industry. If they were going around making that case and saying, hey, elect Nina Turner, as soon as she goes to Congress, she's going to pressure Joe Biden to do that, to give you healthcare, that would have made people look twice and be like, oh, wow, I didn't know that. And I didn't know that he could do that. And I didn't know nobody's pressuring him to do that. So if there's somebody running in my district who's promising to put the pressure on him to do that, I think that could have gotten more people to turn out. Maybe you wouldn't had 80% voter turnout, but the point, portraying yourself as somebody who's willing to challenge the establishment and the corporatist politicians, even the ones in your own party, that excites people and that shows people that you're different and that you're authentic. And she decidedly did not do that, and she went with the strategy, as Jeff Weaver said, and when he spoke to somebody at Axios, that they weren't on purpose not trying to be antagonistic or adversarial to leadership in the Democratic Party. Yeah. So that's the path that she chose to go down, and it did. I'm not saying that was the only factor, but when you have hundreds of thousands of people who didn't show up, you have to look at the way you ran the campaign and judge whether or not that affected the excitement level in the race.
And just to add on that, especially as an open primary, because you had people like Ryan Grimm and others try to argue against an open primary, saying that, you know, Republicans were voting against her, which is crazy and ludicrous, because if you have an open primary as a candidate and you're a progressive, right, doesn't that give you the impetus to try to get people who would normally not vote at all, or who would normally maybe vote independent or vote something else, to be like, hey, there are other things she could have talked about that would have gotten the attention of a lot of independents in a state like Ohio. Like, there's other things that she could have highlighted. Like, she could have talked about, I don't know, like, just more civil liberties more. She could have talked about other things, and imperialism. She could have said, hey, I'm for ending wars. She could have done that. Why? Because she has it's an open primary. So she could talk about other issues that other sectors focus on. And instead, she went to try to be a better Democrat, or a better establishment Democrat than her opponent. And that in itself is a losing deal, because you're not going to be a better establishment Democrat than the establishment Democrat. Why are you trying to be a better establishment Democrat? So to the people that say that had nothing to do with it, like Jordan, and you know, and then say, oh, all these people that are just angry she didn't go to the march and all this other stuff, is that it's like you're telling people to do the same thing and expect different results just because you want to be cool with a politician. Because at the end of the day, you know, I understand as a journalist, you want to get these interviews. I totally get it. But at the same time, it's like you have to push. You can't just continue giving softballs to politicians just because you want to be all good with them, right? Because you're not pushing any strategy. You're just pushing the same old strategy that hasn't worked.
Yeah, and it's bizarre to me because Jordan Sheridan, during the election, he was proudly going around talking about, oh, this is the smart strategy. You have to be a good Democrat. You have to sell yourself as this loyal partisan Democrat, this team player, because there's a bunch of conservative voters in the district. So he was advocating the same shitty strategy that Jeff Reaver was.
Right.
And now that we see that the voter turnout was so shitty, and it is clearly had an impact on it, instead of, like you said, reassessing the situation, they're going to double down and say, oh no, she wasn't a loyal Democrat enough. So what the fuck do you want her to do now? Where do you want her to take this? You wanted her to capitulate to the party even more? Because it seems that she might try to run in the primary again in the beginning of next year. So you want her to capitulate more and sound more like a Democrat because that's going to work? I mean, it's like a non-falsifiable claim to them. Like, you have to, according to them, you have to pander to these conservative voters. And the point that you made about it being an open primary is such a great point. And that's always been the way I viewed electoral politics. Because we know, and you guys repeat on your show all the time, and I repeat on my show, and so does many other people, the largest voting bloc in this country are people who do not vote, are people who are fed up with the duopoly and the corrupt politics that run our country, and they decided to check out. So those are the biggest people who are eligible to vote and choose not to vote. And those are the largest voting bloc in any election. And so if in this specific instance of Nina Turner's race, she has an open primary, why then do you want to limit yourself to that pool of conservative Democrats? And I'll get to my take on how unmovable these people really are. But why would you try to limit yourself to that pool of conservative Democrats who you already believe are less inclined to like you because they voted for corporate Democrats like Joe Biden and Marshall Fudge? So why are you going to limit yourself to that pool as if there isn't a bunch of other people in your district who probably wouldn't vote because they know that politicians, no matter who gets elected, is going to do anything to affect their life or change their life? So why don't you go and convince those people, hey, I'm going to be that politician who's actually going to shake shit up and challenge the status quo? So that's always been the way I view how any race should be run. And that's part of why I appreciated Bernie Sanders' 2016 campaign, because that's what it was based on. It wasn't trying to persuade loyal partisan Democrats. It was trying to get people out who normally wouldn't come out. So that's how I feel about it. And then the part about how unmovable these conservative Democrats are to begin with, like I mentioned in the article, people act like it's some type of blood oath that they swore to the Democratic Party, and no matter what, they just could never leave them under any circumstance. And I think that's very easily disproven by the fact that most of the people who are so antagonistic and so hostile to the Democratic Party, people like myself, people like you, people like basically any other content creator in our space you can think of, and many of the activists, prominent activists who made grown their platforms recently, they were all people who supported the Democratic Party and believed in the duopoly and believed that this is the only way to get change. But you know what happened? We were provided with the information of what's actually like what we actually get with this whole quote lesser to evils voting, that shit just keeps getting worse. And we understand that voting for these corporate politicians, no matter what party they're in, is just going to make the shit worse, and it isn't going to advance your policy agenda at all. So what we did was we decided to remove ourselves from that, and now we've made them the enemy just as much as the corrupt Republican Party. And I think it's because we understand materially, for our own self-interest, we can't just keep supporting this party that's hostile to us. And I think no matter who it is, no matter how many Democrats you voted for in your life, if somebody presents you with the information, like I mentioned earlier, hey, Joe Biden can literally provide you healthcare free at the point of service. Right now, he has to sign a piece of paper, but he's so corrupt, he won't fucking do it. I don't care how many Democrats you voted for in your life. I don't care how old you are. If somebody came and made that case to you at your front door repeatedly, and you were bombarded with it, emails and commercials and ads and all those things, you're going to kind of think twice and be like, is this true? And you're going to look into it. And if you find out that it is true and Joe Biden is just protecting the profits of his corporate donors, I don't care. Like I said, I don't care how many Democrats you voted for. That's going to turn you off of the Democratic Party. So and that's kind of gets to like the core of the whole piece was just tell the truth about how insidious the Democratic Party is, because you are just perpetuating this mythology that they're not that bad. But in every single way you can think of it, every single major policy area, they are literally hostile to the interest of the public. So when you continue this farce and you tell people to run in these races and ignore the elephant in the room, you're just perpetuating this myth even further. And I'm not going on for a little bit, but it keeps connected back to the article. So like, what if you agree with that point of view, that we just need to we can never address the elephant in the room, and we always have to tiptoe around the issue, and we can never say the Democrats are as corrupt and as fucked up and as hostile to you as the Republicans. We can never say that in an election. So how do we ever like get rid of this mass delusion across the country that the Democratic Party is something that people should be invested in? How do we get rid of that mass delusion if nobody's ever going to challenge the Democrats and actually point out how insidious the party is? Because it's not going to be the mainstream media. They're not going to wake people up to how fucked up the Democratic Party is. It's not going to be the education system, because they all manufacture consent for the duopoly. And that's what they've been doing for decades. Yeah. So the only people who are up on the game are these left-wing activists. And so, and the people who are these alleged left politicians who are running these campaigns. We're the only ones who are up on how corrupt the Democratic Party is. And when you tell us, oh, don't bring it up in the campaigns, so we're just never going to address this. And this is always going to be a problem, an obstacle to progress, because we all agree it's a problem that no matter what the Democrats do, no matter how bad they are, tens of millions of people are going to come out and vote for them regardless. They could get even worse than Donald Trump, as we see with Joe Biden, and people will still swear their allegiance to them and come out to vote for them. And that's because they're not aware of how bad the Democratic Party is. Yeah. So my take on this is, on a strategy perspective, I don't even think that that's a way to even win elections, as we've seen with the Niko Turner race. But even if you do think it has it might negatively impact a campaign, and I'm waiting to see the evidence of how that's true. Don't you think that that's a project worth taking on in the long run, because like I said, nobody else is going to do it. So had this been the strategy of Bernie Sanders' campaign back in 2016, and he didn't fold and bend the knee to the Democratic Party, and he went guns blazing and he said, I'm not going to endorse the Hillary Clinton. They literally rigged the primary and they cheated me and they cheated all my supporters and they're corrupt as shit. They did it all to serve their corporate interests. And I'm going to raise hell about it. And I'm not going to stop talking about how fucked up the Democratic Party is. If that had been the mission and the strategy of the most prominent people on the left movement over the last 5 years, I think that the mass delusion would have been wearing very fucking thin. And the Democrats would have been scrounging to find people to come out to support them in another election, because it would have been an actual open debate that's being had instead of this quiet thing that's only allowed to be talked about in lefty circles online.
Yep.
So I do think we need to bring this debate into the public and let them see how corrupt the Democratic Party is and let them defend their shitty policies to their constituents instead of hiding behind this veneer and this farce that they're actually the good guys there to help you protect you from the bad Republicans.
Yeah. Yeah, my next two questions were, pretty much you just answered the next two questions. Why we can't say, the Democratic Party is insidious as shit. I remember this stuff with the WikiLeaks, drops and stuff. It's like, oh my God, Julian Assange is helping Donald Trump. He shouldn't be saying this. He should have been quiet about this. Or unless he had some information on the Republican Party, then he shouldn't have put this out there. Like, it wasn't okay to say how insidious the Democratic Party was with their own fucking emails.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And also, I also was going to ask why it is important to deconstruct the mythology that the Democratic Party is the party of the working class. And I think you did answer that, and I think it is important to constantly do that because it's a two-way street. It's not only about going outside the party and building our own movement to get people over there, because you say they're just people follow the party just religiously, blindly. You know what I'm saying? No matter what, they're going to vote for blue no matter who. So it's important to say, okay, hey, we have something for you to offer over here, but look why, because look at them right here, what they're doing. And I think that's what this article was all about. It was so great because it really made me feel proud to be a part of the Convo Couch, because there aren't a lot of people who are pushing back and talking except guys like you and me and us over here at the Convo Couch. So I really just want to highlight that part of the article that I thought was great, because you did answer those questions we just had, by the way.
And I want to add to that point about WikiLeaks, because that's another great example. Like, why it's so important to never let them get a pass, because look what happened. They did a masterful job. They get an A fucking plus in the way that they managed to distract people from the rank corruption that we found in those WikiLeaks. That has never been the topic of national discussion. It was always everything else, and now it's 5 years later, and there's never going to ever be any accountability for the shit that we learned in there. And that should have tanked the Democratic Party. But because
it was the Russians.
It was the Russians.
That was the conversations.
We can't infight because Donald Trump might get elected. It was all this. There was all these same people were making the same excuses for why we can't criticize the Democratic Party openly, and they missed the opportunity back then. And that was a legendary, historic moment to really kneecap and sink the Democratic Party. But nobody decided to take advantage of it, and they once again believe they subscribe to that mindset that, it's in our best interest to never tell people how corrupt the Democratic Party is. And like I said, now that's just a missed opportunity. All the corruption, all the pay to play with the Clinton Foundation. And then they shut the Clinton Foundation down as soon as the election was there to prove how it was just like this money laundering operation. They shut it down after they lost the election, and they knew when they wouldn't have any influence. And we had all the examples of them taking bribes from foreign governments and self-enriching and all that stuff. All that was laid bare. The Wall Street speeches, we had the transcripts. Nobody all the haters shit that was in the coordination between the media and the DNC and the White House on how they were going to rat fuck Bernie and his supporters. All of that was out in the open, and that none of that. Nobody had to ever answer for that. Yeah. And like I said, I think that should have been the real starting point of this project of really tearing down the credibility of the Democratic Party. And we should have just been building on there every step of the way, because every step of the way they keep doing shit that is inexcusable and disqualifying and indefensible. But nobody's actually making the case to the public that these people are just shouldn't be representing you.
So just to finish up two last questions, I wanted you to explain why this quote from Jordan Sheraton is a bad strategy. He said, you cannot continue to exert your revolutionary thinking and yearning to burn down the system to older voters and suburban voters. That's what he said.
Yeah. So, like, and again, I think my problem with Jordan Sheridan's political analysis is he just builds a straw man of the people who disagree with him and his approach, and even have reasoned substantive disagreements that they will list to him endlessly. And he will just, like I said, water off a duck's back, and he will just act like none of those substantive points exist. And he just debates the straw man between himself and Jen on status quo, and never really like engaging with the crux of the arguments that I'm making. He will never address any of the points that I made in my time here on the Convo Couch today. He will act like nobody ever made these points, and instead like keep spouting off those ridiculous straw men, like, oh, we're knocking on doors in the fucking nursing home talking about, hey, you ready to start a revolution and let's tear down the system. Like, nobody's saying that's the way to get Medicare for all. Nobody was saying that. But like I said, there's a difference between doing that and telling people the Democratic Party that you swear allegiance to is rat fucking you just as bad as the Republicans are, but nobody's telling you the truth about it. That's very different from being like, oh, let's put up the guillotines, everybody. Let's set them up outside the nursing homes and like have the, like, nobody's saying to do all of that. And I like I said, I just think that's a ridiculous straw man. And I just wish that he would engage with the real criticism, because he's gone, like, out of everybody who takes this position, he's as avid and loudmouthed about it as anybody else. But he's just like talking to himself about it and making arguments and like slapping down arguments that nobody's actually making. So I just think it was silly. And like I said, I wish he would respond to the criticisms in that article, any of the criticisms that I've made to him on Twitter, in any of the exchanges that we've had, any of the videos that I post. I wish he would actually engage with the substance instead of these fantasy straw men of irrational, rabid leftists online who don't think and are incapable of like a coherent thought.
Yeah. Last question too. We just got to wrap it up because we made some comments today about the way all the shit libs just exposed themselves today with this whole Afghan situation, trying to really talk about, oh, Biden is the savior now, he's pulling out of Afghanistan. But there was also people who was like, shit libs that were also kind of exposing themselves. You talked about Marianne Williamson. What are your thoughts on what happened in Afghanistan, and where should the credit go, if there is any credit or blame go, for this whole situation, this debacle of 21 years and over $1 trillion and thousands of lives?
Okay, so I'll start with the credit. Nobody involved deserves any credit, and this kind of gets to like this weird framing that we spoke about when it comes to the measurements of like how the Justice Democrats are performing, and like they're doing the same thing with Joe Biden. Like, oh yeah, he has a 40-year track record of all these heinous policies, and specifically in Afghanistan. From the very beginning, he's been a key figure, lying us into the war and lying about the war and doing genocide for profit for 20 years. And now we're going to like give him credit because I'm to this point, I'm still not even sure what he's doing. He's like talking out of both sides of his mouth saying, we're getting out of Afghanistan, but we're going to keep doing airstrikes and we're going to do counterterrorism missions. So you're not getting out of Afghanistan and you're doing this whole show like you're getting out of Afghanistan. And it's, first of all, even if he was getting out of Afghanistan, I wouldn't give him credit because, like I said, you started this, you lied about it. And I don't mean, this isn't my conjecture. We all read the Afghanistan papers. Clear as day, Joe Biden knew exactly what was going on from the beginning of the war. Genocide, rampant murder for the profit of the military-industrial complex for 20 years. He knew about it and he's lied about the public systemically for 20 years. So even if he day and decided to end the war, I'm not giving him out. But aside from that, he's not even getting out. So I'm confused why people are like backslapping him and like applauding like seals because he's saying, oh, we're getting out of Afghanistan. While he will say in the same speech, in the speech he just gave today, he said, like, in the first 5 minutes, he said, yes, we need to get out of Afghanistan, but we also need to keep doing counterterrorism missions like we're doing in Syria and in Iraq and Somalia and in Libya and in Yemen. So you mean to tell me you want to end the war, but continue the military occupation? So you mean the war is going to continue, but you're just going to, it's like the when they ended the Iraq war. Like, so I wish people would be more skeptical of the Biden administration, more skeptical of the narrative, because to this point, and Kyle Kalinski's been like, I mean, I wouldn't say he's the worst, but like, out of the people who understand how terrible and inexcusable our occupation has been over the last 20 years, he seems to be like not understanding that the occupation is continuing, and there's no signs that it's actually going to end. And Biden is just like literally doing what he always does, saying what people want to hear, and the policy follow through is never there. So that part is bizarre to me. And then Marianne Williamson is disappointing, and it kind of shows me how other people might be perceiving this, other people who aren't as up on the U.S. war machine as we are, and they might see all of this chaos unfolding, and it is legitimate chaos in the country, and now they're immediately repeating CIA, State Department talking points that they always use to get us to stay involved and to defend military intervention about, we need to defend the women and the children and human rights and all those things. So if it's disappointing coming from somebody like Marianne Williamson, because she is somebody I respect. I respect her more than most politicians. She does show up when other politicians won't, like with Julian Assange and March for Medicare for All, Forced to Vote. So there are times when she is more right than any politician in the country. But like I said, this was a very disappointing, because it just goes to show how the narrative that's being spun about what's happening right now is very convincing to a lot of people. And I hope that this doesn't lead to like more people supporting our endless occupation in Afghanistan, because after what we learned in Afghanistan papers, all those for the life of me, it is inexcusable, and it's also disqualifying that Bernie Sanders and the rest of Justice Democrats haven't held a single hearing on the Afghanistan papers. Yep. But we need to get to the bottom of that. There should be investigation. People should be capitalizing on this moment right now where everybody's talking about this. We shouldn't just be giving him credit as if he didn't play an active role in this for 20 years. And he should have to answer for that. Everybody in his administration, Tony Blinken, and everybody else who played a role in this and then went on to profit off of this war, they should have to answer for this, and they should be charged criminally, because the endless war crimes were committed over the last 20 years, and they were intentionally covered up by the U.S. government. Yep. So I know you guys want to wrap up, but that's kind of my thoughts on Afghanistan right now.
Well, thank you for coming on and speaking to us, and I think that's a very good assessment of what's happening. It's really crazy to see the left just, embrace Biden like he's done something good, because it's not. But can you tell people where they can find you on your YouTube channel and your Substack?
So you could find me on youtube.com/unapologetic. You could just type unapologetic in the search bar, and my channel should be the first thing that pops up. You can find me on Substack. I'm trying to write more regularly. I'm working, the next article that I'm going to publish on Substack, it might be something on Afghanistan, but after that, it is going to be an article on something that we kind of talked about here, which is this giving credit to politicians and trying to both sides of everything, like, they messed up here, but they did this good thing, so let's give them a round of applause and throw a parade. So I want to kind of talk about that in more detail, and that's going to be on something I'll publish on Substack soon. Yeah. So thanks for all the support. Thanks for all the shout outs and the retweets, and thanks for having me on, guys. It was a great conversation.
Our pleasure, Dontel.
Thank you, Dontel.
Thank you. And don't forget, Dontel, that they had a lot of colorful graphs and pretty pictures in the Afghan papers, which allowed people to vote for it to keep going on. That was their excuse.
Yeah. We gotta save the women and the children, and those graphs look really convincing. Somebody in those generals in those suits, I can't say no.
Thanks again. Go check out his work, everybody. Great read over there. Unapologetic.
Unapologetic, exactly.